questions at the end if you'd like to ask. Today we have John Warren talking to us about taking technologies and ideas to the company step where you can explore the potential for licensing, startup companies, and also potentially joint ventures if that's what he gets into today. I've got a great case study to go over so you guys actually have context of what he's talking about. It's not company A, company B, but some generic technology. Feel free to ask questions, and what would be really nice at the end is if you guys can take what you learned today and look at it from the perspective of your technology and what your group is doing. Do you envision it being a startup, a startup company forming from it? Do you envision technology being licensed through Curve, something like that? So have that focus with the notes that you take when you hear Mr. Warren speak today. Thank you.
The last time I was in this building when I was a student at Clemson was 35 years ago. Anybody have any idea what this building was 35 years ago? Huh? It was the laundromat. So Dillard, so when we met this morning, he said, we're going to the Dillard building. I thought, I remember a building named Dillard. I'm trying to place a classroom, and I couldn't remember what it was, and as we got closer, I realized where Dillard was. So Clemson has made an amazing transformation in 35 years, I'll tell you that. So I'm excited to be here. I've been working with Dr. Desjardins now for 2-3 years with students, and trying to help think through how to commercialize some of the technologies that you're working on. And I was here, or was it a couple of weeks ago, but we had the ACC Inventor competition. How many people in this room participated in that one way or another? One of the things that I noticed in your presentations, which were very good by the way, I was impressed with the quality of the presentations I saw. But one of the things I noticed that was common, which means somebody had taught you to do this, was you had a total market and an addressable market and a target market, or some formula like that. It was three levels, right? Everybody had something like that, and you've been somewhere along the way somebody taught you to do that, and that's important. I mean, it's important to know how big you think the market is for what you're doing, but there's a challenge in that, a kind of top-down, 55,000-foot look at the technology you have. And you really don't have a clue how to sell anything when you do that, do you? I mean, you probably feel a little bit uncomfortable as to whether the market's really that big. Anybody feel that way about those numbers you got finished with? That you're really not quite sure if that's exactly right or not? I mean, you've kind of gone online and you found information where you could, but you really haven't validated it in any way, and you're not really sure. And it's that ambiguity that is the challenge that makes you feel uncomfortable. That there's probably more that you don't know than you do know about what you're doing. Anybody feel that way from what you've done? Right? And so what I want to talk about this morning is a little bit of a different approach to the way that I saw you analyze markets in the Inventor presentation. And that is kind of a bottom-up approach. Okay? How do we deal with that kind of inherent ambiguity that you experienced in looking at the technologies that you were trying to commercialize? How do you deal with that? And there's two specific things that I hope you take away from today. And one is it better for you to take your technology and try to go to market by licensing to a major corporation, right, who's going to put this into the marketplace and maybe pay you a royalty? That's one path forward, isn't it? Is that the best path for you? Or, is it better for you to try to start a company and take this technology to market? Which of those two paths is appropriate? How would you know? How do you go from where you are to that? Now, let me say something as we're going through this. This will be a whole lot more interesting to you if this is interactive, right? And if you're sitting here with questions, or I spark something, you raise your hand, and we have a conversation about it, you'll get a whole lot more out of it that way than if you just listen to me talk for 50 minutes. So please do that, right? Please stop. Hey, what about this? What about that? Because I really want this to be something practical and useful to you. I taught MBA classes for a while, but getting to the end of the semester, students would evaluate me, and they would always say, "You don't teach like a faculty member." And I'd say, "Well, that's good, because I'm not." So I always have a very practical, can you put this to work kind of attitude toward any time I do one of these things. This is my company. It's called Concepts to Companies. And where this came from was, y'all know Delphine Dean and Kayla Wilson. I met Kayla a couple, 3 years ago now. And if you remember, she had come up with an idea to inkjet print glucose test strips in remote villages in Tanzania. Remember that idea? And she had a pitch, and the pitch was, we can do for a penny what it cost $1 a day. And a partner and I saw that and said, "Well, that's good." And we showed up and met with Kayla and Delphine, and we said, "We'll coach you into starting a company." And they looked at us and they said, "No." We're not business people. We don't want to be a business people. Delphine in particular has chosen an academic track in her life. She loves being at Clemson. She loves teaching her students. And the idea that she's going to go start a company just wasn't on her agenda. And quite frankly, took us back a little bit. I mean, in my world, everybody kind of wants to be an entrepreneur, so to actually have somebody say no was my own enlightening moment. And for me, it was a bit of customer discovery. I'm here trying to help people on campus, create companies out of their ideas and their concepts. And I had somebody say, "No, I don't like the path you're on. I don't like the approach you're taking." So, we stepped back and said, "Well, what do we do?" And so what we came up with is this company called Concepts to Companies. And so we start with ideas, lab bench technologies, and we try to turn them into startup companies. And this is actually a first slide from the investor presentation. And the reason I included it here is I wanted you to see the graphic at the bottom. And so we start with what we call a proto company. So an idea that has this kind of a business concept, not really a company, kind of an idea, a hypothesis, if you will, right? And quite frankly, most of the things that I saw in Inventure a couple of weeks ago, that's the stage they're at, right? They're kind of hypotheses of what a product and a market might be. Not really validated fully, but pretty good starts. And most of the things that I've seen on campus, that's where they are. And so then we go through a process of customer discovery, of actually going out and getting in front of prospective customers and asking them what they want, right? What are their problems, really? To start there. I mean, when you got to work this morning or you woke up this morning, what was the problem that you had that was difficult, expensive, or inconvenient? And I have found that people are usually, if you'll ask and listen, boy, they'll talk. They'll tell you what the challenges are. Henry Ford was famous for saying, if I'd asked them what they wanted, they'd have said faster horses, right? So people couldn't have told Henry Ford that they wanted an automobile, but they darn sure could have told him what was wrong with the horse, right? I mean, it eats too much, it poops too much, it gets sick, it's too slow. I mean, they could have rattled off a whole lot of problems that they had, with their horses. They couldn't have told you what the alternative was necessarily, but they could have told you, what the challenges were. And I have found that people are more than willing, if you'll ask and listen, they're more than willing to talk to you. Now, I've also found that on contact, plans change, right? I mean, you go out and you ask people what you think their challenges are, what the solution to that is, and you'll often find that your first pass at that is wrong. So when we showed up in Delphine's office and said, "We're going to coach you into starting a company," I mean, that crashed and burned. No, not going to do that. You need Plan B, John, because that one's not very good. And that is usually the case in my life. And maybe B and C and D aren't very good. Eventually, tenacity trumps talent, so that's good for me. Because eventually we get there. You figure out how to sell something, you figure out how to make that first sale, that first person that's willing to write you a check, well, that's a pretty exciting day. When you finally get to where somebody believes enough in what you're doing to stroke the check for it. And then the question is, how do you go find more people like that, right? How do you scale that up? How do you, and this really starts to get into the differentiation of this something that you're going to to take to a large company? You know, is this going to take an existing medical device manufacturer and let them take it to market for you? Is that the best way to do this? Or are you not going to find anybody out there that does exactly like this? Are you better off trying to create a company that's going to create an entirely new channel? This is really where the fork comes as you make a decision which way you want to go. If you've decided to do a startup, then there's this whole process of company building, right? You start to make some sales, then you have to build a sales team. Now you have people, so you need HR, you need marketing, you need legal, and so you start to build the infrastructure around really turning this into a company. And then, at least from the perspective of people that invest in you, at some point in time, people are going to want their money back, plus a return. So, you've got to come up with a way of either selling the company or recapitalizing it.
Going back to the proto company,
Yeah.
talk for a moment on the type of technologies and kind of where the technologies are at that point. Kind of go further into detail what the hypothesis technology kind of looks like, and what's kind of a too early stage for a proto company, what might be too late stage for a proto company, if there is such a thing.
No, I don't think there's such a thing. I mean, let me contrast it this way. So, there's a researcher on campus, Thomas Medford, and Thomas is the first to tell you, he does basic research, right? He's funded by the National Science Foundation. He's on the bleeding edge of what he does. He doesn't really take commercialization into account when he does the kind of research he does. So that's not really a proto company. Now, this is incredibly important for society, right? I mean, somebody needs to be pushing the boundaries of what's possible in his discipline, but he's just not the person in this world that's going to try to commercialize it. Now, the interesting thing about Dr. Medford, if you know him, is if you want to find out